In the past 2 or 3 decades, the public's appetite for professional fasting has markedly declined. Time was one could make a decent living from the noble art of fasting, even under one's own management, but today that's quite impossible. We live in a different world now. Yes, it's hard to believe, but once upon a time the whole town took a lively interest in the starving artist, and the excitement would build with each passing day of the fast. It seemed that everybody wanted to come and see me. Every day. And there were people who bought tickets for the last several days, sat before the bars of that little cage from morning till night. Even at night they'd come. Flaming torches, adding to the dramatic effect. And if the weather was fine, the cage could be set out in the open air, where the children could come and watch the starving artist as a special treat. I suspect adults sometimes only came along to boast at having witnessed this extraordinary theatrical phenomenon, but the children knew better. Those children stood open-mouthed, clinging to each other in their excitement as I sat there before them, this strange, pale figure, all in black, ribs protruding, and no chair, just down there on the straw-strewn ground. I might give a polite nod or answer a blurted question with a patient smile, and every once in a while extend an emaciated arm through the bars of the cage, so that one of them might feel how very thin I had become, and then again withdrawing deep into myself, paying no attention to anyone or anything, not even to the all-important striking of the clock, the one object to be found in this barren cell, just staring into nothingness with half-closed eyes, just now and again sipping from a tiny glass of water. Just to moisten my lips. In addition to the audiences per se, there were teams of watchers selected by the public, usually butchers, strangely enough, whose job it was to watch me day and night, always in threes, to prevent any attempt on my part to partake of nourishment. Now, this was a mere formality implemented to silence the doubting Thomases, for the initiates knew well enough that during a fast I would never, under any circumstances, swallow even the smallest morsel. My professionalism, my devotion to my duty expressly forbids it. Not everyone, of course, can aspire to such lofty principles. Indeed, there are groups of night watchers who are very lax in their duties, preferring to huddle in some distant corner, absorbed in a game of cards, if you please, tempting me by their negligence, so they think, to a little light refreshment which they presume I would be grateful to draw from some secret stash. Nothing offends me more than these sham watchers. Their indifference, makes nonsense of my devotion. They're an affront to the art. Occasionally during their watches I'll endeavour to master my frailty sufficiently to sing for as long as possible to prove their suspicions groundless, but to little avail. No, they marvel only at my ability to sing with my mouth full. No, much more my kind are the conscientious observers who sit up close to the bars, not content with the flickering glow of the flames, fix me instead in the full beam of the electric pocket torch provided for them by the impresario. No, the unstinting glare does not trouble me in the least. I have nothing to hide, and I've never been one to sleep on the job, although, if necessary, I could always drowse a little, whatever the light, whatever the hour, even in a busy auditorium such as this. I'm delighted to be spending a wakeful night in such diligent company, happy to share a joke, or perhaps relate an amusing anecdote from my vagabond life. Anything to keep you alert, and to prove once and for all that there is nothing to feed upon in this cage but the dwindling flesh of the man who sits before you, and that what he is doing is beyond the capabilities of any man, woman, or child here, beyond your wildest dreams. And when the morning comes, it is my very great pleasure to provide for the night watchers an enormous breakfast, on which they invariably fling themselves with the ravenous appetites of healthy men after a strenuous night shift. Of course, there will always be those who suggest that the breakfast is merely an attempt to bribe the watchers. Perhaps some among the cynics would care to stand vigil. No greasing of palm or gullet to sway your judgment, naturally. Do I see a volunteer? None? Quelle surprise. And yet the slanders persist. Well, such suspicions are, after all, a part and parcel of the faster's lot. It seems no one can bring himself to scrutinize the starving artist constantly, day and night. Therefore, no one can produce irrefutable first-hand evidence that the fast has been rigorous and unbroken. No, only the artist himself can know that. I'm therefore bound by my constancy to be the sole satisfied spectator to the entirety of my glorious self-denial. Must there then be another explanation for my habitual disaffection? Perhaps it's not fasting alone perhaps it's not fasting at all that can bring me to such skeletal emaciation that many see fit to steer clear of my exhibitions. Am I too much for you? Have you no sensibility, no sensitivity? No imagination? Or is it possible that they find me in some way insufficient, inadequate, altogether not enough? Perhaps a greater hunger does consume me. After all, I alone know what no one else could possibly know, how naturally it comes to me to fast. It's the easiest thing in the world. I make no secret of it, and yet they don't believe me. At best they mistake my honesty for false modesty. Most of them, however, think it all part of the act, or suspect a trickster who finds fasting easy because, whisper it, he's discovered a way of making it so. And he's now got the gall to all but admit it. Oh yes, I've had to stomach all that. And, well, for a while it was water off a duck's back. Sticks and stones. in time, it can begin to gnaw away at one's insides. Never during the course of any engagement have I ever left this cage of my own free will. The maximum duration of a fast is fixed at 40 days, beyond which I am not permitted to venture, not even in the metropolis, and with some good reason. Trial and error has indicated that the public interest can only be sustained for around 40 days, and that only if stimulated by a steadily intensifying campaign of advertisement. Beyond that, attention begins to wane. Sympathetic support noticeably dwindles. There are, of course, regional variations, but as a general rule, 40 days represents the limit of the public's indulgence. And thus it is that on the 40th day, my flower-bedecked cage is opened. Enthusiastic supporters throng the locale. A military band plays. 2 doctors enter the cage to measure the effects of the fast, the results being relayed to the waiting throng by megaphone. And finally, 2 young ladies appear, giddy at the honour of having been chosen to decorously assist our conquering hero, the starving artist, down a few steps to a simple table on which has been laid a carefully selected convalescent repast. Now, it is at this crucial moment that some have said I can occasionally display just a hint of an artistic temperament. Yes, I might entrust my bony arms to the outstretched helping hands of the charming ladies inclining dutifully towards me, but stand up I will not. Why should I cease fasting now merely because a 40-day limit has been reached? I've held out for a long time, you might even say an eternity. Why quit now, having found my best fasting form, with perhaps even finer to follow? Why would you rob me of the glory I so richly deserve? It is within my reach the power to succeed, to exceed, to venture beyond the limits of human imagination. You express your admiration. Where is your patience? If I can endure a longer fast, why in heaven's name cannot you? But in truth, I am close to exhaustion. I'm comfortable down here in the straw, and now I'm expected to draw myself up to my full adult height and experience this fulsome meal, the very thought of which gives rise to a nausea to which only the presence of the ladies prevents me from succumbing. And I look into the eyes of these ladies, so gentle, so sympathetic, but no, so cruel, like all the rest. Oh, my head feels so monstrously heavy on my feeble neck. I fear it will break. God in heaven, not again. The impresario is stepping forward. Silent for once. The clamour of the band would drown even the loudest of voices. He's lifting his arms into the air above me, inviting heaven to gaze down upon its creature here in the straw, this suffering martyr. Oh, a martyr I am indeed, though why you will never know. And he takes me by the waist, oh, so gently, so that you may better appreciate the frailty of my condition. Giving my limp body a crafty shake, making it totter and sway as he commits me into the care of the blenching ladies. Enchanté, mademoiselle. Heavens, you're pale as death. Don't be alarmed. But I feel so helpless. I can barely lift my head. I'm empty. There is nothing left of me. I cannot feel the ground beneath my feet. Oh, pardonnez-moi, mademoiselle. Yes, forgive me. I know hardly the blissful engagement you dreamt of. Please. Oh, you poor creatures, how you gasp and stare. Why do you look at me in that dreadful manner? She's straining her neck to keep her beautiful face as far from mine as she possibly can. Her friend is no help. She's gripping my hand for all she's worth. A hand, it's no more than a little knotted bunch of knuckle bones. Her beautiful pale arm is trembling. Her eyes are filled with tears. Please, please don't cry. Why is everybody laughing? They're leading her away now. The burly attendant takes her place. Now, for the detested sustenance. The impresario forces a filthy morsel between my reluctant lips. I sit as in a trance. His practised patter persists, detracting the public's attention from the less savoury aspects of my condition. By way of finale, and at the whispered hint of the artist himself, a toast is proposed to his loyal followers. The band scores it with a mighty flourish. The crowds dissolve, and no one is left with any doubt that they have witnessed a masterful performance from an artist at the peak of his powers. No one! Except the artist himself. Me. Alone. Always. So have I existed for many years with brief, regular interludes for recuperation. Established. Respected. Fated by the world. And troubled at heart. And all the more so because nobody will take my trouble seriously. After all, what comforts do I lack? What more could I possibly wish for? And should some well-meaning soul seek to reassure me by suggesting that my melancholy is aggravated by my chosen profession, my vocation, you Philistine, it can be. But especially when deep into an engagement, I fly into a rage, rattling the bars of the cage like a crazed beast. The impresario has an exquisite means of punishment for my protestations, which I have no doubt he takes great pleasure in putting into practice. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the unfortunate behavior, which I beseech you pardon. Such outbursts are not uncommon in these artistes, though thankfully they remain beyond the comprehension of most decent, well-nourished gentlefolk. And he's going on and on. He's telling them about my desire to fast for longer than the 40-day limit. Oh, he's commending the ambition, even vouching for my ability to succeed, professing his admiration for the great self-denial implicit in such an endeavour. But wait. There. The kiss of Judas. He produces photographs available for purchase depicting me lying almost dead from exhaustion on the 40th day of a fast. This flagrant betrayal of the truth hits with redoubled horror every time he dares to suggest that this brutal and premature termination and the effects thereof are actually the consequences of the fast itself. How long must I endure this world of deceit and ignorance? And once again, I lean trembling against the bars of the cage as the impresario speaks, but when the photographs appear, there is nothing left but to sink into the straw with barely a sigh. And once more, the emboldened public closes in and gazes down upon me. Later, when the witnesses to these scenes are requested to call them to mind, they're often at a complete loss to explain just what it was that caused them to become involved at all. For in the meantime, this sea change in public taste has come to pass. It seemed to happen almost overnight, and there may well have been very good reason for it, but what of it? Frankly, no matter. Notwithstanding, one fine day this pampered artist finds himself deserted by the pleasure-seekers, all streaming past him in their droves to other, more fashionable distractions. For one final tour, I'm shuttled over half of Europe to see whether here and there the old fascination may remain, but all in vain, everywhere, as if by conspiracy, a positive disinclination to the noble art of fasting is in abundant evidence. Of course it can't have happened overnight. And many telltale indicators which were missed in the initial rush and glitter of success do now come haltingly to mind, but all too tardy for any effective countermeasures to be taken. What am I then to do? Oh, fasting will surely come into fashion again at some unknown date in the distant future, but what of the living? Am I, once lauded by thousands, really expected to sell my soul in some tawdry booth at a village fair? And as for adopting another profession, well, not only am I a little long in the tooth, but I'm altogether utterly devoted to fasting for that. So, here we are. Or rather, here I am. Since I've parted company with the impresario, my one companion on life's tortuous path. And I've joined a large circus. Perhaps through naivete, or maybe just a vain attempt to salvage the ruin of my pride, I've refrained from reading the small print of my contract. A large circus like this, with its constant coming and going of personnel and beasts and equipment, will find use for a body at any time, even a poor starving artist, provided he doesn't ask for too much. And in my particular case, it isn't merely a position filled. No, they secure my celebrated and long-established name into the bargain. And indeed, considering the singular nature of my profession, which is not in any way diminished by my advancing years, I cannot be written off as an artist past his prime, seeking sanctuary, eking out his dotage in some forgotten corner of a travelling circus. Far from it. No, I maintain that I can perform as well as ever I could. And should I be allowed to fast as I see fit, I would astound the world by exalting the noble art far beyond any elevation hitherto attained. Sir, is there room enough in your circus for a talent such as mine? And to my absolute astonishment, my challenge is met. Although some eyebrows are raised at my missionary zeal in light of the current gloom. I have not, however, completely taken leave of my senses. I know the score. and I freely accept that I may no longer command centre stage. My name must now be a little further down the bill. My role in support, an intriguing cameo perhaps, and on the fringes, a little closer to the animals. But it's a good pitch, convenient, accessible, brightly coloured placards frame the cage, announcing my presence within. When the crowd come streaming out in the intervals for a look at the animals, they cannot fail to notice me, and they're bound to tarry for a curious glimpse. At least they might, were it not for the hooligans jostling in the corridors. It's just impossible now for anyone to linger and to gaze pensively for any length of time. I had thought that these engagements might represent a late blooming of my career, something of a swan song even, but alas, I have begun to dread them. At first, I looked forward to the intervals with bated breath and pounding heart as the crowds began to stream towards me, but it wasn't long. Not even the most deluded of optimists could fail to realize that these people, well, most of them. Oh, God, open your eyes, those, all of them. They're on the way to the zoo. And that first distant glimpse, as is so often the way, was as good as it was ever going to get. They're outside the cage now, and I am deafened by the cacophony of shouting and abuse that breaks out between the two disparate and ever renewing factions. Those who wish to stop and stare, and I think I despise them most. They have no genuine interest, only a stubborn urge to block and spoil, and the others who simply wish to blunder on and gawp at the zoo. Ah! Well, eventually, the stampede subsides, and the latecomers dribble in. But though nothing now is preventing them from stopping to watch as long as they wish, well, they too are striding past at full tilt, with barely a sideways glance, in their haste to be rid of me. We've got to get to the animals before it's too late. And it's only once in a while that I'm blessed with a family visit. A jaded father, seeking to rest his weary legs, stops, sits, gestures lazily towards me and explains to his bored brood just exactly what it is we have here, relating tales of his own salad days when he first came across one such as myself, but how nothing he sees today could possibly compare with the thrilling scenes from that golden interlude when his world was still young. And his offspring knows the drill, though even they seem a little nonplussed by this impromptu lecture. Well, what do the youth of today care for discipline and restraint? And yet, is there something in the curious brightness of those keen young eyes to suggest that a new age of enlightenment might soon be upon us? I often wonder how different my own life might have been had I not become lost among the beasts. But one makes a poor choice, takes a wrong turn. What misery ensues? The stench, the howling at night, the hunks of raw flesh lugged past for the carnivores, the roaring of feeding time. But one mustn't make a fuss. After all, the hordes come for the beasts, and who knows, there might always be one among them destined for me, and where might I end my days should I actually draw attention to my presence, and thereby to the fact that when all is said and done, I am merely an obstacle on the way to a zoo? Small obstacle. Indeed, a steadily diminishing one. The absurd notion that in times such as these anyone would take the slightest interest in a starving artist. No. No, the novelty is well and truly worn off. Indulgence has wilted to indifference. The verdict has been delivered, the sentence passed, fast as I might, and I do. Nothing can save me now. The world has passed me by. How does one begin to go about to explain this art of self-denial? One cannot be forced to feel that for which one has no understanding. Fine placards fade, begrimed, unreadable. They're torn down. And that little notice board indicating the number of fasting days achieved, at once, of course, changed daily, has long languished at the same figure. Well, after the first few weeks, even that simple task seems nothing but a waste of time, and I simply fast on and on. And it's no trouble. It's no trouble at all. Just as I first said, long time ago now. But, you see, well, nobody counts the days. No one any longer has any idea of the scale of my achievement, not even I. And my heart is heavy. And when, once in a blue moon, someone ambling past does notice me, pauses to consider, reads the old figure on the little notice board, and then announces to the world in general that a swindle is afoot. You see, that in its way is the stupidest lie ever bred by indifference and innate malice, since it is not I who is cheating. I'm working honestly as ever. No. The world is cheating me of my reward. And so the end. An overseer's eye falls on the cage one day, and he asks the attendants why this perfectly good cage should be left standing here unused, nothing inside it but rotting straw. Well, nobody seems to know, until one old hand, perhaps helped by a broken piece of old placard, remembers something about a hunger artist. They prod in the straw with their sticks, and they find me there.
You still starving? When are you going to give all that up then?
Forgive me.
Of course we forgive you.
I just wanted to be admired.
Well, we do admire you. Don't we, lads? Yeah.
You shouldn't admire this.
All right, we don't admire it. Why shouldn't we admire it?
Well, it's not as if I had a choice. This is my life. I cannot be anything else.
What are you talking about? God, look at the state of you. How do you mean you can't do anything else?
Because, and I lift my head a little and speak with lips pursed right into the overseer's ear so that not a syllable should be lost. Because I couldn't find anything else I liked. Had I done so, believe me, I would not have made a show of myself. I'd have stuffed my face along with the rest of you. My last words, but in my failing eyes remains the unshakable conviction that this art will go on.
Right, let's get this lot cleared out then.
And they buried the hunger artist, the poor, starving artist. They buried him, straw and all. They put a young panther in that cage now that he's gone. Even the dullest of them thinks it's a pleasant change to see this wild animal throwing itself around in that God-forsaken cage that stood dreary for so long. The panther is fine indeed. His attendants instantly provide him with all the food that he loves. It's strange, he doesn't even seem to mourn his freedom. That noble body, fit to bursting with all that it desires, seems to somehow carry its own freedom around with it, lurking somewhere. In those terrible jaws, perhaps. And a lust for life streams with such ferocity from its throat that the audience is tempted to flee for their lives. But no, they gather themselves. They crowd the cage. You see, no one has any mind to move away.